May you speak in the name of the God who created us, who loves us, who walks with us. Amen. Please be seated. So I want to see who I'm talking to here this morning. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I'm part of something that's called Generation X. Are there any other Gen Xers out there? Raise your hand. So this would be born 1965 to 1980. All right, a few of you. All right. I needed to know that context. You know, that's great. Some of you probably just didn't raise your hand because that's a quality of Gen X, apparently. Yeah, whatever. Well, let me give you a taste of my Gen X childhood. I'd come home from school, I'd make a snack, and I'd plop down in front of the TV to watch something called the ABC After School Special. The ABC After School Special. Who's heard of that? Okay, most of you. All right, well, good. If you grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, you remember these shows. The grainy film, the really bad perms, all those very serious lessons, always delivered with a dramatic synthesizer soundtrack. Right, Richard? He knows what I'm talking about. And the episodes, they had titles like, The Day My Kid Went Punk. Are you embarrassed by your parents? And this is a good one. Tattle. Willing to tell on your friend. And the moral of these stories was often the same. Do the right thing, everything will work out, and this is so important, make sure in the end you say thank you. And at first glance, today's gospel reading reads like one of those episodes. 10 lepers are killed, 1 returns, moral of the story, be the thankful one. Cue the credits, roll that groovy music. And yes, gratitude, it matters. Giving thanks to God for our blessings is part of what we're doing this morning. In fact, the word Eucharist, it literally means thanksgiving. But today's gospel reading isn't just an after-school special about good manners. It is one of the most theologically loaded passages in all of Luke. And at its very heart, it asks a really important question. What does faith look like? In it, Jesus is still on that long, dusty road to Jerusalem, and we find him walking on the margins, in the borderlands between Samaria and Galilee. And there he encounters this band of lepers. And it's important to know that in the Bible, leprosy is not what we think of today with Hansen's disease. But what it was serious rashes on your skin, growths, and sores on your body. It was very visible, and in fact, society saw these men as unclean. So they'd been cut off from their community, from touch. They were in exile. And keeping their distance, these 10 strangers, they call out to Jesus. They beg for mercy from Jesus. And he simply says, go and show yourself to the priest. You see, that's what the law required. To be declared clean, you had to go through this big ritual production where you got the good housekeeping seal of approval from the priest before you could return to your friends and to your community and be declared clean. So these 10 lepers, they obey Jesus, and they start walking to the temple. And along the way, a miracle happens. They're healed. And 9 of them, looking down at their new skin, they're like, this is awesome. In fact, after they go to the temple to be inspected, I have to think they went down to the farmhouse at the crossroads and ordered a big plate of calamari and some steaks to celebrate. They were excited. But one of them, this guy that I have to imagine might have been played by a young Rob Lowe in an after-school special, one of them, he turns around. And he goes back to Jesus, he falls at his feet, and he says, Jesus, thank you. Thank you. And Jesus replied, your faith has made you well. Yes, the 9 others, they were healed, but there's a difference between being cured and being made spiritually whole. The Greek word this week is sozo. It means to be made whole. Mind, body, heart, soul, to be saved. Also, the one who turned back back to give thanks, he was a Samaritan, and this is not a small detail. In Jesus' time, Samaritans were seen as heretics. They didn't worship in the right place, they didn't worship the right way, and they didn't believe in the right things. So Jews saw Samaritans as completely beyond the reach of holiness. So this healed Samaritan was both a leper and a foreigner. And yet it is this outsider among outsiders, the last person to think that he could receive God's mercy. He is the one who truly knows what grace feels like. His faith was the act of turning back toward the source of all love and recognizing it. He saw clearly with gratitude that our Creator moves and heals even in the places that we think are God-forsaken. In Jeremiah's letter to the homesick exiles in Babylon this morning, he tells them this on behalf of God: build houses, plant gardens, seek the welfare of the city. It's a call to solidarity because even in times of exile, God says we must embrace our shared faith fully and faithfully, to be part of a resistance of hope. In reading these ancient words this week, I kept thinking about how words like foreigner and alien are used these days. How they're constantly uttered to dehumanize. And you better believe that I was thinking about our immigrant neighbors and friends. Our neighbors, many of them who are poor and they're uprooted and they're in exile. Migrants who feel scapegoated and hunted. Literally hunted right now in their neighborhoods. Those places where they've tried to make their homes, where they've planted gardens, where they've worked so hard. My Bible tells me that God has a thing for people who are hurting and vulnerable. God has a thing for people this world casts aside. And refugees and immigrants and their families right now, I think, are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable in this country. Even if you omit the rhetoric and the headlines and your own lived experiences, even if you're trying to figure out where you stand on the complex issues of immigration right now, even if you're wrestling with that, I pray that you will do this. I pray that you remember our shared humanity. I pray that you remember those times in your life when you have felt like a foreigner. When you felt displaced by a loss, by a failure, by illness. When you felt displaced because you're lonely, or because of discrimination, or addiction, or even because of church hurt, because the church, for whatever reason, has told you you don't belong. In our humanness, we are all of us, people who experience times of deep hurt and vulnerability, those times when we feel like strangers in a strange land, when we cry out for mercy. If we forget those times, I think we forget our own story. We forget the way of Jesus. Because in our family and our own faith stories, we too come from wanderers, as that reading from Jeremiah reminds us. We come from exiles. And Jesus definitely knows what it means to be a foreigner. On the cross, God in flesh entered our exile. He entered our loneliness and our wounds. But here's the good news. I want you to know, no matter where you're at this morning, if you are feeling like an outsider, if there are places in your life where you feel disconnected and wandering, I want you to know that those are the places where the divine goes to first. That is God's promise in the Psalm this morning, in 2 Timothy, in the Gospel. When our heart breaks, God's heart breaks. So have faith. Have faith. But then I get back to that question. What does faith look like? tell you what faith is not. Faith is not a privilege of citizenship or paperwork. Faith does not attempt to inflict pain and fear on those who are already hurting and afraid. Faith is being tough enough to be kind. It's realizing that all of our earthly lives, all of our lives are a journey between Samaria and Galilee, somewhere in there in the margin, between illness and health, between exile and return. Faith is knowing that the Bible isn't just an after-school special with moral lessons. It's a love story. It's a love story without borders, about a God who desperately wants to be intimate with you. Even when this world tells you you're unworthy, even when you think you're too far gone, God is always reaching out to you. Because God's healing love is bigger than anything in its way. And eventually, when the time comes, when exile becomes home, when light overcomes the darkness, faith is receiving that grace and saying thank you. Even if it's just turning around in surprise and wonder and speaking it gently into the autumn night, saying thank you. Knowing that it's heard.